I was 17 the night my parents decided I no longer belonged to them, and the strangest part was that it didn't happen during a fight. There was no shouting, no dramatic storming out. It happened casually, the way people talk about weather or grocery lists, as if my life were just another inconvenience to manage. We were in the living room, my mom's friends sitting on the couch with coffee cups in their hands, laughing about their kids' college plans and internships. I was standing near the doorway, half invisible, already used to being the quiet one, when my mother gestured toward me and said, almost jokingly, "She's the family mistake." The room went silent for half a second, just long enough for the words to land. Then my dad laughed. Not nervously, not awkwardly. He laughed like she just delivered a punchline. He pointed at me and added, "She's the 1%. The kind you don't plan for." Everyone chuckled politely, unsure whether they were allowed to laugh, but relieved when my parents did. No one looked at me. No one asked if I was okay. I stood there feeling like the floor had dropped a few inches beneath my feet, like I'd been misaligned from the rest of the world. That night wasn't the first time I'd been made to feel like a burden, just the first time it was said out loud in front of witnesses. Growing up, my brother was the golden child. His grades were framed. His trophies lined the shelves. When he spoke, my parents leaned in. When I spoke, they checked their phones. If something broke, it was my fault. If something went wrong, I was too sensitive or dramatic. I learned early that survival meant silence. Don't ask for much. Don't take up space. Don't expect warmth. After my mom's comment, the conversation moved on as if nothing had happened. Someone asked about dessert. Someone refilled their cup. I excused myself quietly and went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed staring at the wall. I remember counting my breaths because it felt like my chest was caving in. I wasn't crying yet. I was numb. There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just sinks in and settles, heavy and permanent. Later that night, my dad knocked once and opened my door without waiting. He didn't apologize. He didn't sit down. He stood there with his arms crossed and said, "You heard what your mother said. We've been thinking for a while. Maybe it's time you learn how the real world works." I asked him what that meant, even though I already knew. He sighed like I was exhausting him and said, "You're 17. You're old enough to figure things out. We're not kicking you out. But we're not stopping you either." My mom didn't even come upstairs. She sent my dad to do the talking, the way she always did when something uncomfortable needed to be handled. I packed a backpack in silence. Clothes, my school ID, a notebook, $42 I'd saved from babysitting and odd jobs. That was it. No goodbye. No hug. My parents were in the kitchen when I walked past them. My dad nodded once, like we'd just completed a transaction. My mom didn't look up from the counter. I stepped outside into the cold night air with nowhere to go. For the first few weeks, I stayed with a friend from school whose parents let me sleep on their couch. I told everyone it was temporary, that things at home were complicated. Inside, I was terrified. I finished high school pretending everything was normal while secretly wondering where I'd end up once graduation came. I worked after school, then late nights, then weekends. I learned how to stretch a dollar until it barely resembled currency anymore. I learned how to smile when people asked about my family and answer without saying anything real. College wasn't an option the way it was for my brother. No tuition help. No safety net. So I took community college classes while working full-time. I slept 4 hours a night. I studied on buses. I failed sometimes. I kept going anyway. Every time I wanted to quit, I remembered my mother's voice calling me a mistake, and something stubborn inside me refused to let that be the last word. Years passed like that, quietly, no announcements, no applause. I built my life piece by piece while my family stopped mentioning me altogether. I saw photos online of holidays I wasn't invited to, birthdays celebrated without me, smiling group shots where my absence looked intentional. Eventually, it stopped hurting the way it used to. It just became information. This is who they are. This is where I stand. By my mid-20s, things began to change. Slowly at first, then all at once. I found work that paid better. I moved into my own place. I stopped living in survival mode and started planning. I went back to school. I learned skills no one had taught me. I made friends who knew nothing about my past and liked me anyway. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact every day. I was building something stable. I didn't tell my parents any of it. Not out of revenge, but because it didn't occur to me to include them. They had made their choice years ago. I had made mine. 8 years after the night, I left with a backpack and $42. There was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. So when the knock came, sharp and hesitant, I almost ignored it. My life had become quiet in a good way. No surprises. No sudden emotional storms. I had learned to protect that peace. But something about the rhythm of the knock made me pause. It wasn't confident. It wasn't demanding. It sounded unsure. When I opened the door, my parents were standing there. For a second, my brain refused to register what my eyes were seeing. They looked smaller than I remembered. Older. My mother's hair, once always perfectly styled, was pulled back carelessly. My father's shoulders slumped forward, like gravity had finally decided to claim him. They weren't smiling. They weren't angry. They looked lost. My mom was the first to speak. "We just wanted to talk," she said softly, like she was afraid her voice might break if she pushed it too hard. I didn't step aside. I didn't invite them in. I just stood there, the door half open, my hand resting on the frame. For a moment, none of us said anything. 8 years collapsed into silence. Every memory I had tried to archive neatly in the back of my mind pressed forward. At once the laughter, the pointing finger, the word mistake. My father cleared his throat. "We heard you were doing well," he said. It sounded rehearsed, like a line practiced in the car. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was familiar. They hadn't come because they missed me. They hadn't come to apologize. They had come because something had reached them. News. A rumor. Proof that I hadn't disappeared the way they assumed I would. "What do you want?" I asked. My mom's eyes filled immediately. "We made mistakes," she said. "We were under a lot of stress back then. We didn't handle things the right way, back then. Like it was a bad season. Like it wasn't a defining fracture that reshaped my entire life." I asked them why now. They exchanged a look, the same look they used to share when they were deciding what version of the truth to tell. My dad answered, "Your brother mentioned something about your job. About how well you're doing. We thought, maybe we should reconnect. You're still our daughter." That word landed differently than they expected. Daughter. Not mistake. Not 1%. Daughter. It felt like they were trying to retroactively rewrite history, to paste a softer label over something brutal and permanent. I finally stepped back and let them in, not because they deserved it, but because I needed to say things I had carried alone for too long. They sat on my couch, stiff and uncertain, glancing around my apartment, like they were mentally calculating the cost of everything they saw. Old habits. I didn't offer them drinks. I didn't ask how they'd been. I sat across from them and said, "Do you remember the night you told your friends I was the family mistake?" My mother flinched. My father looked away. "You laughed," I continued, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. "You pointed at me. And then you let me walk out of that house with $42 and a backpack. Do you remember that part?" My mom started crying. Real crying this time. Not the dramatic kind she used to use to end arguments, but the quiet, leaky kind that sneaks up on people when their defenses finally crack. My father rubbed his face with his hands like he was trying to erase something. "We didn't think you'd actually leave," he said. "We thought you'd come back. That was it." That sentence explained everything. They hadn't rejected me because they didn't care. They had rejected me because they assumed I would crawl back, that I would beg, that fear would fold me into something smaller and more manageable. "I didn't come back," I said. "No," my mom whispered. "You didn't." I told them what those 8 years had been like. Not dramatically, not with embellishment, just facts. Couch surfing, working 2 jobs, studying at night, being sick and not being able to afford a doctor, celebrating milestones alone, building a life without parents to fall back on. Every sentence felt like setting something down that I'd been carrying too long. My father's hands started shaking. He took off his wedding ring slowly, like the movement itself required thought. He set it on the coffee table between us. The sound it made was small, but in the quiet room it felt enormous. "We failed you," he said. 4 words. No excuses. No conditions. My mother reached for my hand, then stopped halfway, unsure if she was allowed. "We want to fix this," she said. "However you want. We'll do anything." I looked at them for a long moment. The version of me at 17 would have accepted anything. Any scrap of approval. Any hint of regret. But I wasn't that person anymore. "You don't get to fix it," I said calmly. "You get to live with it. And maybe, if you're patient and honest and consistent, you might get to know me again. Not the version you imagined. The real one." They nodded, both of them, like people finally understanding the rules of a game they'd already lost. They left not long after. No hugs, no promises. Just a quiet exit. When the door closed, I stood there for a while, listening to the silence settle back into place. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. Because the truth is, the comeback they were reacting to wasn't my job or my apartment or my stability. It was my absence from their control. I had built a life without their permission, and that was the part they couldn't undo. Some people come back into your life not because they've changed, but because you have. And when that happens, you get to decide how close they're allowed to stand. That night, I slept better than I had in years.